everyone. How do you feel today? Great. Did you drink some beers last night? 1, 2, 3, 16. That was good. No, just kidding. Good morning. I'm very pleased to welcome you again to this jDay, the last day. My name is Christian Dybeck and I'm your host. How many of you are new today? Can you raise your hands? You are so welcome. You missed very interesting things yesterday, but we will promise you that today there will be more interesting things and exhibitions. We also again want to thank our sponsors. Without our speakers and main sponsors, we couldn't run this conference. Now I want to give you some practical information that you need for today. Keep your badge around your neck all day, because those are the pass for you to get lunch and anything else. Not everything else, but some things. So please keep it safe. There's one conference room here, and this is the room that we are in now, and then there is 3 additional rooms upstairs. And if you have any questions during these days, please contact the conference managers here in this area. And those guys, they wear orange t-shirts, so you can't miss them. This is the agenda for today. Thank you, HiQ, for the morning coffee. You will find the agenda in the jDay app, so if you haven't downloaded it yet, please feel free to do that. There you will find all the information you need. I want to promote the full-day workshop session tomorrow, executed by experienced instructors. It's not too late to register, so please sign up at the registration desk. In the app, you will also find the information that you need about the workshop. A full-day workshop costs about 2,900 Swedish crowns. It will be 10 to 15 participants at each workshop. Ladies and gentlemen, today's keynote, Anders Janmyr. Anders is a programmer since 20 years. He loves programming, but also talking and writing about it. He has a wide experience of programming languages and has worked with front-end, back-end databases and embedded systems. So please, ladies and gentlemen, you remember how to use your hands. Anders Janmyr!
Thank you. Hello. Just have to wait for the technology to work. Here we go. So, programming an HS-1969. What does that mean? What I'm talking about today is learning. My point today is that we're all programmers, even those who don't consider yourselves programmers, because we're all programmers of the hardest computer of all to program, the Homo Sapiens, ourselves. This is my son, Rasmus, about 13 years ago. He was quite a difficult child. He had colic, he didn't sleep, he was screaming all the time. But that wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part about for me with Rasmus was that I couldn't understand what he wanted. I would look at him and he would do things and no, I don't understand. And then one day when I was changing his diaper, he said, "Aha." Aha? I thought, what the? And he said, aha, aha, aha. And then I figured out that every once in a while I actually understood what he was talking about. And then I said, aha, I know what you mean. And when he said it and I understood it again, I said, aha. And he went, aha, because he realized that I had understood him once again. So this little critter, he was 1.5 years old, he understood the aha moment. And that, I think, is really cool. So here's an outline for the talk, or rather an outring. First, I'll talk about insight. Then I'll go into deep learning, and with deep learning I mean understanding, not memorization. I'll talk a little bit about shallow learning, which is basically categorization. And then I'll talk about some learning obstacles, and then I'll get back into insights a little bit more. So, insight. We all know what insight is. We all had the aha moment, and we know how good it feels. And I think that almost all human progress comes through insights. Einstein, you can't have a presentation like this without showing Einstein, because he was so famous for being an intuitive scientist. He even shaved very slowly in the mornings because he was afraid he was going to have an insight and that he was going to cut himself. So that's when he had his insights, or a lot of them. So what is an insight then? An insight can be a lot of things. It can be a punchline of a joke, it can be a realization of something, and it can be understanding of a problem. It can also be understanding of other people. That's perhaps where it's most useful, because someone is behaving oddly, and you don't understand why they act the way they do, and then you find out something about their background, and then you just realize, aha, so that's why they do that. And perhaps we don't even only get an understanding, we also feel for them. We don't dislike what they do as much anymore. So the main thing is about understanding. That's what insight is mostly useful for. So let's have an insight problem. A window washer fell from a 40-foot ladder onto a concrete and was not harmed. How is that possible?
It was on the first step.
Exactly. He fell from the bottom step. Here's another one. This sentence has 3 errors. 2 are obvious. This, 3. The third one, anyone? Sorry?
It's not counting right.
Yeah, exactly. Or no, actually, the third error is that this sentence doesn't have 3 errors. Yeah.
Counting.
Yeah, okay, counting. So, and that's even more nice, because then it's a paradox, because when you realize that this is the problem, it actually has 3 errors. And then, so very nice. Here's one that's a little bit harder. This is a historical person, a rebus, Horrobud. The answer is Robin Hood. Why? It was, oh yeah, let me move back. Rob in Hood. You see it? Yeah. Fermat's equation, you know it? It says the solution to xn plus yn equals cn doesn't have any integer solutions for n larger than 2. And this was conjectured by Fermat in a copy of Arithmetica, a mathematical book. And he wrote in the margin of this book, "It is impossible to separate a cube into 2 cubes, or a 4th power into 2 4th powers, or in general any power higher than the second into 2 like powers. I have discovered a truly marvelous proof of this, which this margin is too narrow to contain." He did this in 1658, I think. And it took Andrew Wiles 7 years of his working life to solve this. And it took humanity 358 years to solve this problem. And this is how Andrew reacts. Do we have any sound? No?
It's not rolling?
Maybe it's my pointing device.
September, I was sitting here at this desk when suddenly, totally unexpectedly, I had this incredible revelation. It was the most important moment of my working life. Nothing I ever do again will.
So that's how powerful his insights was. When he talks about it, he can't even control his feelings. A couple of more problems. Turn this pyramid upside down by moving 3 coins. I'm not going to give you the solutions to this one until later in the presentation. But I'll give you a moment to study it. And here's one more. It's a classic one. It's called the 9 dots problem. You should cover all the dots by drawing 4 straight lines without lifting your pen. I'll give you a moment to take this one in too. And then the solution comes later. Maybe you figured it out. So, when do we get insights? Like I said before, Einstein got his insights when he was shaving. I usually get a lot of insights while I'm out walking my dogs in the morning. But Wittgenstein wrote about this, and he said that the key to insights is the 3 B's: the bed, the bath, and the bus. So in other words, we get insight a lot of the time when we're not actually thinking about the problem. So the bath comes from Archimedes. He had his eureka moment when he was lowering himself into a bath, and he realized when the water was rising that he could use this knowledge to measure the volume of an irregular object. And he voiced it, "Eureka, eureka," because it felt so good to solve this problem. Edison, he used to take working naps. He used to sit in his shop and had metal balls in his hands and had a metal plate under the chair, and then he tried to fall asleep, and when he fell asleep, he dropped the balls and he would wake up, and he often had ideas and insights to problems. Poincaré is also, he was a famous mathematician, and he is the bus in the 3 B's, because Poincaré also wrote a lot about insights, because he couldn't understand it, but so many times he had insights, and he didn't know where they came from. And he wrote, "At the moment when I put my foot on the step of the bus, the idea came to me, without anything in my former thoughts seeming to have paved the way for it, that the transformation that I had used to define the Fuchsian functions were identical with those of non-Euclidean geometry." We don't have to understand what this means, but it was for him a deep insight that he had been working on or trying to solve, but it just came to him when he was not actually working on it. So how do we get insights? How can we improve how we get insights? And this is where the 4 stages of creativity comes in: preparation, incubation, illumination, and verification. Illumination is the actual insight. Incubation is the time when we're not working on the problem, when we're relaxing, when we're out walking, when we're exercising, whatever, taking a bath, going on a bus. Verification is something you only need to do if you're into science and you need to prove that what you actually had an insight about is correct. But most of the time when we understand how people work, we don't have the need to actually verify that it's true. We just feel it, that it's true. But preparation is the most interesting part, because that's the part where we can do something about it. And preparation comes in maybe many forms, but two are very effective. And one is to just do a little bit of something every day. If you want to have insights about a problem, just do a little bit that's concerned with this problem every day, and then it will just linger in your mind, and you will be much more likely to have an insight about the problem. The other thing is to just immerse yourself into a subject. Just read up all you can about it, and then you just let it go and let your unconscious do the work for you. But it's not that easy, because this is Linus Pauling. He got the Nobel Prize in chemistry in 1954, but he also got the Nobel Peace Prize in 1962. And he talked about insights too. And he said, it's what you have in your memory bank, what you can recall instantly that's important. You can't look it up. If you have to look it up, it's worthless for creative thinking or for having insights. So the key to insights is to know many diverse things. You cannot Google for insights. You have to immerse yourself in something and then let go, relax. So, deep learning, as I said before, it's not only memorization but understanding. Memory comes in two forms. We have working memory, which is kind of like a blackboard, where you put things on it, but to be able to do something or put something new there, you have to erase it. And then you have long-time memory, which can be seen as a library. You can have a lot of things. It's not even known if there's a limit to how much memory we can hold in our brains. But sometimes it's hard to find it. The process of creating a memory has been divided into three parts: encoding, consolidation, and reconsolidation. And the encoding part is when you take sense information. This all happens automatically, by the way. When you take sense information and your brain encodes it and into a format that it can store. Then consolidation goes to work, and that happens a lot when we are sleeping and when we're not actually trying to learn the problem. It happens in the background. Reconsolidation is when you actually retrieve the memory from from your brain, and that changes the memory. So every time you retrieve a memory, it creates new paths in your brain, but it also changes the memory and relates it to information that you already know. The brain can also be seen to be working in two modes. Like it's called diffuse mode, and that's where we have insights. It's when we're not actually working on the problem. And it's focus mode. And focus mode is when we're actually trying to learn, when we're studying. So scientists talk about a piece of memory as a chunk. That's a piece of information. It's a cluster of memory cells that fire together. And the cool thing about a chunk, it's something that you can bring into working memory, but it only takes one spot in the memory, or in the working memory. And it's said that we have maybe 4 spots in working memory. Some say it's 7. 7 plus minus 2 is a famous quote, but lately they think it's less. And I like to, these are called burdock seeds in the background, kardborrar in Swedish. And I like to think of a memory or a memory chunk as burdock seeds because they can cluster together. So, how to form a chunk? One way is this 4-step process. You focus your undivided attention on the task, then you try to really understand what the main idea, what you have read or what you have heard. Then you need to test yourself to verify that you actually know what you think you know. And then, once you've done that, you need to gain context. When can I use this? Not only how do I use it. And by relating chunks together, we can create bigger chunks. And the advantage of having bigger chunks is that you can bring them into memory. So you can bring a whole concept into memory, and you can have two concepts in your brain, and then you may have an insight about this problem. One way to relate things together is by using metaphors or similes. Because by seeing something as something else, we automatically relate it in our brain to something else. And Twyla Thorpe, she's the author of a book called The Creative Habit. It's a really good book. She says that metaphors are good because they transform the strange into the familiar. The leading theory of memory right now is called the theory of disuse. And it's also known as the forget to learn theory. And it assigns every piece of memory a storage strength and a retrieval strength. And a storage strength, it is how well we learn it. It only increases. But retrieval is how accessible this memory is. And it varies with context, and it varies with other things. But the interesting part here is what's at the bottom of the slide, is that retrieval, actually getting the memory out of your head, increases both storage and retrieval strength. So retrieval is the key here. If you don't remember anything else from this presentation, remember that retrieval is what makes your memory stronger. It's how you remember. So a memory can be, if our brain is, or our mind is like a forest, a memory is put somewhere in the forest. And when we try to retrieve it, we walk a path to this memory. And the more we try to do this, or even if the harder it is to find it, the bigger the path gets, and the easier it will be to find this memory the next time. Having these two variables for every memory can create a matrix like this. So we have strong retrieval strength and strong storage strength, which is something like how to ride a bike. We know how to do that. And we know it very well. If we have strong storage strength and weak retrieval strength, if you have learned to drive a car, say in Australia or in England, you know how to drive a car on the left side of the street, and you know all the rules, they're in your head. But if you then move to Europe, or mainland Europe, then you have to forget about this, because if there's a possible accident situation, you need to react in a way that uses your new knowledge, not your old one. So then you need to weaken the retrieval strength of how to drive on the left side of the street and strengthen your retrieval strength of driving on the right side of the street. Weak storage strength and strong retrieval strength is something I have just studied it for a while, and now I can just bring it out from memory easily. But if I let it go too long, maybe I'll forget it. And then weak retrieval strength, weak storage strength. That's this famous, someone you just met at a party, you've just said hello to a lot of people, but you forget a lot of names too, unless you make an effort to remember. So let me show you an example of this. This is a film clip from Smarter Every Day. I don't know if you've been to that website. It's really cool. He films a lot of stuff with high-speed cameras, and then he analyzes the physics, what happens. But this is about riding a reversed bike. So
I hopped on the bike, ready to demonstrate how quickly I could conquer this.
So the faster I go, the better. Yeah.
I couldn't do it. You can see that I'm laughing, but I'm actually really frustrated. In this moment, I had a really deep revelation.
So he practiced a long time.
It was really weird though. It's like there's this trail in my brain, but if I wasn't paying close enough attention to it, my brain would easily lose that neural path and jump back onto the old road it was more familiar with. Any small distractions at all, like a cell phone ringing in my pocket, would instantly throw my brain back to the old control algorithm.
And now he's been riding this bike for a year.
I can't ride a bike because they think I'm dumb. But I'm actually 2 levels deep into this because I've learned and unlearned. All right.
After 20 minutes of making a fool out of myself, suddenly my brain clicked back into the old algorithm. I can't explain it, but it happened in a very specific moment.
I got it. I'm back. Oh, it clicked. Hold it, it clicked. I got it. Okay, there it is. There's the moment. Okay, I can ride a bike.
I tried.
So pretty cool. But as you can see here, riding a bike was actually stored really, really deeply in his head, but his retrieval strength was very weak at the time when he came to Amsterdam. But it took him 20 minutes of trying, and then he could do it, as opposed to taking 8 months of trying to learn to do it from the start. Spaced repetition. It's said that repetition is the mother of all learning. But that's not quite true, because it has to be spaced repetition. It has to be an interval between the repetitions. Because if you just repeat something right after, you're just bringing it out from working memory. And spacing out, making intervals longer, is good for 2 reasons. It lets the diffuse mode get to work on what you have done, and it also lets us forget. So the next time we try to retrieve the memory, we have to work harder. It feels worse because we have to, I can't remember, and then finally it pops up. And when it pops up, it actually gets stored deeper than it was the first time. So, how long should these intervals be? And of course, scientists, they have a lot of interest. So of course they try to figure out exactly how long this should be. So what is the optimal time span? So if you're to study for a test, and there are calculations for how many times you should study and stuff, but if you decide to study 3 times for a test, so the first time you start to study is right now, and the last time you study is the day before the test. That's the most effective. But then, if the test is in 1 week, you should wait 2 days after your first study session to study. If the test is in a month, you should wait a week. And if the test is in 3 months, you should wait 2 weeks, and so on. So, context. So, spacing out is not the only important thing. Context is also important. And context is under what circumstances are you studying or are you learning. So location is one type of context. In one study, they sent divers down underwater where they had to learn some vocabulary. They let them go up to the surface. Half of them took the test on the surface, and the other group went down and took the test underwater. And the group that took the test under the same circumstances, underwater, got significantly better results than the group that took the test on land. And it's not only location, because intoxication also works. This is another study where they let the students smoke marijuana while studying. And then they got to half of them got to smoke marijuana again when they took the test, and the other half had to stay sober. And the ones who smoked marijuana had better results. Scary. Music also. If you're listening to music when you're studying and you get to hear the same music when you're taking the test, you get better results. And it doesn't have to be Mozart like we were told when we had babies and let them listen to Mozart. It can be AC/DC or Bob Marley. And you will have better results if you do this. And not having any music doesn't give you this context because, no music is not a context. But, so what if your teacher or whoever, you cannot reproduce the conditions. You can't listen to AC/DC while stoned underwater every time you're taking a test. So the key is not that. The key is that you need variation. And if you're studying underwater and on the surface, that's better than just studying underwater, even if you're taking the test while skydiving. So the more you can vary the context, the better. And you can vary anything. You can vary the paper you're writing on, you can vary the mood you're in, you can study when you're angry, you can study when you're happy, you can study in the morning, you can study in the evening, inside, outside. Anything that varies the context will allow you to pick up the memories better when you're not in the context you have studied in. Interleaving. Interleaving is actually varying what you are studying, not varying the context, but varying what you are studying. So if you study the same thing over and over again, it's called massed practice, and it's commonly believed to be good because it feels good. It feels like you're learning, and it feels like it's going really fast. You're studying the same formula when you're calculating, say here, an area of a square. You know the formula, it's side squared. And but if you're studying this, and if you're varying the figures you are learning about, or you need to calculate, you will learn a lot better even how to calculate the area of a rectangle or a square by varying your exercises. Here's an example that they did with that. They let some kids throw beanbags, and they had one group that were practicing from 3 feet, and they were throwing beanbags into holes like this. And then they had another group that had to practice on 2 feet and on 4 feet. And then after they had practiced for a while, they got to compete against each other, and they got to compete on the distance of 3 feet, which one of the groups had practiced all the time. And the group that had the varied practice, that used 2 and 4 feet instead, won, hands down. So varied practice is very important. But the thing about it is that it doesn't feel that way. And this is called desirable difficulties. It's like when you're exercising, when you're training. If you're just training and I can do this, 10 kilos, no problem, I can do this all day, it doesn't really help you. But if you put, I don't know how much that is, 150 kilos or something, and you can actually do it, then you get a lot of bang for the buck. And it's the same when studying things. So if it feels easy, it's probably wrong. And testing. Testing is a great way to force yourself to learn, because for 2 reasons. One of them is that when taking a test, you actually get feedback and says, okay, I don't know these areas, so I can study more on that. But it's also a really strong form of retrieval, because we're competitive, and when we're taking a test, we really want to figure out what this information is. So we're trying to remember it, but even if we don't remember it, we will learn it better when we finally get the results. And it works even if you're with pre-testing. So even if you don't know anything, you can take a test before you start learning, and then when you try to actually learn it, it's like you're creating the paths in your brain to the memory, and then when you actually learn the memory, you just pop it into the place where there's already a path in it. Really cool. And they've done some classroom testing with this, and in the US they usually have 2 big tests. They have a midterm and they have an end term test. And then they tried out so that some classes had to take a test every week. And the people that had to take a test every week, their average grade was a full grade better than the ones that only took 2 tests. And we don't have to have formal tests. We can do a lot of self-testing by asking ourselves questions. Do I understand this text that I just read? can I explain the ideas to someone else? Yeah. And sleep is also important for learning. And one reason is that being awake is toxic. Being awake actually creates toxic chemicals in our brain. And when we sleep, these are washed out. And the other reason why sleep is important is that our brain repeats and tidies up the information we have learned during the day while we sleep. It repeats things over and over until we learn it better. Okay, so that was deep learning. Shallow learning. What is then shallow learning? Shallow learning is also known as perceptual learning. And it's learning without understanding. It's really good for categorization because our brain or our senses actually spot differences. We are really, really good at spotting differences in things. So here's an example of this. Chicken sexing. Chicken sexing is when you figure out what sex a chicken has before it's grown up. And this is really important to the poultry industry because I guess they keep the females and then they kill the males, and they want to do that as early as possible to make money. So it may not be very nice, but they want to find out this information. But the thing is that what sex a chicken has is really difficult to tell, and the people who know, they can't really explain it. They can explain, yeah, and you look over there, and you look there, and you look there. And a non-expert just looks, okay, looks the same to me. So what do you do then? Then to train a novice to become an expert, you pair him with an expert. And the novice just picks a chicken from the bunch, looks at the chicken, and makes a guess. Okay, this is a male. And the expert says, no, it was a female. And then he keeps on going, male, female, no, no, yes, yes. And then, after practicing for a while, suddenly the novice starts making correct guesses without knowing how. Because our brain picks up on the differences without our conscious being aware of what the differences actually are. And this is not only good for chicken sexing, it can be used in other areas too. And it's used in flight training. And flight training, if you try to fly by instrument, it's really difficult because you have 6 instruments. It's an airspeed indicator, attitude indicator, altimeter, vertical speed indicator, heading indicator, and a turn coordinator. And when a novice tries to fly a plane, he looks at one of these instruments at a time. And when he finally reaches the 6th instrument, the first instrument has usually changed, so it's not acting the way he thought before. But when an expert does the same thing, he just takes a glance and he looks at the 6 instruments, and he instantly knows what condition the plane is in. And you can learn this with simple flashcard training. So by having instrument settings on a flashcard, you can see like this, and then the novice pilot makes a guess, and then you flip it around, and he can see if it's correct or if it's not correct. And if you do this for an hour training is worth 1,000 actual plane hours of training. Really cool. And that's not the only thing. You can figure out styles on paintings. So say you have a bunch of different paintings and you want to learn what style it is because you want to show off to your friends or maybe for some other reason. So by doing the same thing, you just simple flashcards, you look at it and then you turn it around and you can see that it's abstract art or surrealism or minimalism or whatever. You can learn without knowing anything about art, you can learn to recognize what style of art it is. So I think this is something that will come up in the future because there's a lot of things that where we actually need to categorize things. Okay, learning obstacles. So the biggest obstacle to learning is ourselves, because we think when it feels good that we're learning better, but most of the time that's actually not true. And Richard Feynman wrote, "The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool." So, illusions of understanding. There's something called the fluency illusion. It's when we do something, it feels like we know what we're doing because it feels fluent to us. And one example of this is rereading. If you read a text over and over again, you'd start to recognize the patterns in the text, and you know what the text, how it's going to look. So you believe yourself, yeah, I recognize this. You can just flip through the pages, because every time you read the page, you actually recognize and expect there to be what there is. But if you try to retrieve this information, you probably don't even get it. You can't figure it out. And the solution to this is to actually retrieve the information. A different form of this is highlighting. You just highlight text, and when you scan the page later, you say, oh, okay, I know this, I know this. And you don't actually do the work of actually retrieving it from memory. Then you won't get the extra storage strength or retrieval strength that you get from actually retrieving it. If you're doing math and you look up the answer before you actually solve the problem, so you can look it up and you see, yeah, I know this, and then you look at the answer and, maybe it wasn't quite correct, but I know this, I can do this on the test. If you try to solve it first, even if you're wrong, it's better. And the thing that's a lot more in our time right now is that because we have a smartphone in our pocket all the time, as soon as we can't remember anything, we just pick up the phone and Google it. But if we instead give us the time to actually think about it for a while, and maybe not even remembering it, we can give our diverse mode time to actually pick it up or remember it when we're going home. Another sign that you're actually you don't know what you're talking about is when you're echoing other people's words. So if you can't put it into your own words, it's a sign that you don't understand what you're talking about. Other things that are problems with learning is distractions. Distractions can be anything. It's like can be phones, Twitter, Instagram, maybe. And I put these sounds in there, and even if I put them in there, I still get distracted. I can't think anymore, so I'm just going to get rid of this slide. But one solution to overcoming distraction is the Pomodoro technique. You probably all know what it is. It's just really simple. You just set a timer, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, 20 minutes, and you vow to not be distracted during these 20 minutes. It's that simple. But you have to follow through. Procrastination is another thing. Procrastination is not doing what you know you should be doing. And most of us do it. I know I do it. I know I did it when I was supposed to write this presentation. Because I've never done so much dishes on those days when I said, oh, I need to practice this. But the thing is that all you have to do is start. Because often the anticipation of doing the work is a lot worse than actually doing the work. And I'm sure you recognize this. And I like this one. Writing is the art of applying the ass to the seat. It's not the actual writing that is hard, it's the sitting down to write. So, back to insights again. Here's the pyramid. I don't know if your brain has been working in the background, so does anyone know the solution to this? Yeah, a few people. You just move the corners. You see it? The 9 dots problem. This problem is actually famous because this is the problem that coined the term think outside the box. This is where this term comes from. So you need to think outside the box to draw the 4 lines. Anyone know it? Yeah, a few people. Have you seen it before? Ah, okay. The solution is, one solution is like this. Simple when you see it. So one more thing about insight is that this is Martin Seligman. He's a psychologist, positive psychology, and he has written a book called Authentic Happiness, among other books. And he's done a lot of studies with people who feel good instead of people that feel bad, which was what psychologists used to do before him. And in a study on creativity, the subjects or the students who were put in a good mood produced a lot better results. So happy people perform better. And increasing happiness increases the likelihood of insight. So before I summarize this presentation, I'd like to tell you a joke just to put you in a good mood and perhaps give you an insight. And I know there's at least one Norwegian in the audience, so I apologize in advance. So 3 Norwegians were out walking in the woods, and then they saw some tracks. And one of the Norwegians said, "Det må være en hare," which means it must be a hare. And the second Norwegian said, nej, det må være en elg. No, it must be an elk or a moose. And the third one, he didn't have time to say anything before the train ran over them. So, summary. Insights, they help us understand things. They're possibly the way that humanity progresses. In order to have insights, we have to learn things deeply, and we have to learn diverse things, because we can't have insights about things that we don't have available to our minds. The key to learning deeply is retrieval. Retrieval, retrieval, retrieval. And our biggest obstacle is that we actually fool ourselves because we think we are learning better when it feels good. And a happy mindset improves the likelihood of insight. So stay happy. And here are 2 links where you can read about the same information as this, because I can give you the slides also, but the slides doesn't tell you very much because they're just full of pictures. And this blog article that I've written here also contains references to a bunch of books where you can find more information, and which is the references for this whole presentation. So, thank you very much.